conventions of 80s coming-of-age high school-based comedies that me and Paige used in Under the Influence were inspired by 80s films, particularly of that subgenre and genre. Example of the film openings that we looked at to kind of take inspiration from include Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, The Goonies and Don't Say Anything. These type of films were very popular in the 80s and we wanted to kind of bring conventions from them into ours, because not only would it make it more realistic but also may attract a wider audience. The shots that we took show the 80s conventions. The biggest example is the close-up shot of Paige when she shouts "woo", because it shows the hedonistic, fun-loving character that was quite popular in 80s culture. Only 80s music is used because we wanted to make sure that it felt like an 80s film to our audience. Obviously it makes it more real if we use these 80s music, and it would be conventional of 80s films because they'd be going off the music that they know. We really focused on mise en scène because we wanted to make sure that no modern technologies or products were in the background or were used in the film. We wanted to just make sure that it was as realistic as possible. The unconventional things that we did were the journey at the beginning, because it showed a more dramatic side to the narrative, which would involve drink and drugs. It wasn't going to be as conventionally happy as the stereotypical 80s films, such as the ones that we used for examples. The social group that was presented in our film opening Under the Influence was teenage girls mostly, but we used them to kind of as a kind of comparison to each other. So one was more of a rebellious example, which is commonly seen in 80s films due to the influence on society at that time from people like Joan Jett and Madonna. The other extreme was the shy and quiet character, which was played by Nicole. Often popular 80s Brat Pack films would have a character like this, such as Claire in The Breakfast Club. Stereotype of teenagers is that they are antisocial and misbehaving, so we wanted to both perpetuate and challenge this with two different characters. There's also a small social group represented in the older male teacher, which kind of shows a representation of teachers that was common in 80s films as being quite boring and unimportant to the story. I think that an independent film company such as Fox Searchlight Pictures would be interested in distributing and promoting my film, as it follows a fairly artistic direction and it's also able to be flexibly low budget. Having a low budget means that it's more likely to be picked up and funded and more achievable as well, as there's only going to be a certain amount of creative input, because I think that in an independent film it's low budget while being fairly artistic. 500 Days of Summer was an independent film and it was a huge commercial success because with a low budget you can get a lot more money back than what you're spending. Sundance Film Festival often screen independent films, so using them could help promote the film that Paige and I have created. The target audience for Under the Influence would be anyone who has experienced the 80s or is particularly interested in the decade. Our market would be fairly young, but the dramatic side of the narrative, through the heavy use of drugs and drink, could see the film with a rating of 15, meaning the target audience couldn't be too young and would be between 15 and 30, the teenage and young adult market. The audience most attracted to our film would probably be female, as the characters that are most relatable and most important within the film are female characters. I used a wide range of different features to attract the target audience. The female audience I thought would be brought in by the relatable female characters, because it's very focused on the two teenage girls, Paige and Nicole's characters, as they kind of grow up and move on with their lives, which is something that everyone can relate to at some point. Bright, bold and colourful text was used in the actual film opening because it keeps audience attention while on screen, and the soundtrack, made up of both popular and less popular 80s songs, brings in an audience interested in the 80s and familiar with the 80s, stressing that it's the setting of the film. The beginning of the film starts with a journey, and it kind of keeps audience keen to see where it's going, so that attracts them to keep watching. The rating I felt our film would get was a 15, so I thought that the teenage element of it would bring in that audience and attract them. I'm able now to use 2 types of cameras more efficiently than before, both of them being Canon. This was developed through the tutorials that Mr. Ball did to help us, and through my own use and knowledge of them, which was brought on through actually using the cameras. I'm able to navigate through Blogger better than I was used to at the beginning because I've got more used to using it. The iMac editing software iMovie was used to edit all of the footage that we got, so it helped me to gather more knowledge about using it and using the iMacs themselves to do more things, and it's going to be helpful in the future as we're going to be using them again to produce other media products. I think that since the prelim task I've learned a lot about production and distribution of films, production companies and things like that, and what they're actually there to do, and where money comes from, and how films are just marketed and given to an audience. I can understand conventions and stereotypes presented in other film openings other than my own, which is seen on my blog through the 5 film openings that we had to evaluate. I was able to spot representations of different characters within films much more easily, and my technological skills have advanced from not being able to use the cameras or the Macs at all to being able to create film openings with much more ease using this software. I can understand the importance of and I'm able to use continuity editing to create realism in the film. In Under the Influence, there's a lot that we needed to swap from take to take, and I would usually have the Paige and Nicole and Joash film their parts all in one go, even when the shot was changed, just to make sure that I could cut it in the right places so that it was continuous.